This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Beijing reacts to a recently passed U.S. tech investment bill aimed at countering China. Al-Qaeda-affiliated group denies responsibility for Burkina Faso terror attack. And UN General Assembly commits to ending AIDS by 2030. What does this mean for Africa? Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at other stories coming up this hour. The World Bank projects the global economy to rebound at its fastest pace in 80 years. In sport, Ethiopia's Letesenbet Gide smashes women's 10,000 meters world record. We begin with the latest tech tensions between China and the US. Beijing has urged Washington to abandon its Cold War zero-sum game mentality after US senators passed a bill investing billions in American technology and innovation aimed at countering China. A foreign ministry spokesman said the US should not treat China as an imaginary enemy, as the country's biggest enemy is itself.
We urge the United States to treat China's development and China-US relations rationally, stop promoting such bills, and stop interfering in China's internal affairs so as not to damage overall bilateral relations and cooperation in important areas between the two sides.
China's legislature, the National People's Congress, has also issued a response. Its Foreign Affairs Committee says the bill smears China's domestic and foreign policies and interferes in internal affairs, while also accusing the US of trying to contain Chinese development under the pretext of innovation and competition. The bill reaffirms the US support for Taiwan's defense and calls for Taiwan's membership in international bodies, which Beijing strongly opposes. Kate Fisher has more from Washington, D.C.
This is a huge bill in terms of the amount of money we're talking about. It authorises $190 billion to be spent on strengthening US technology and research, $54 billion going to semiconductors and telecommunications, with $2 billion specifically dedicated to those chips that auto manufacturers need so much because they are in such a shortage here in the US right now. There was a rare moment of accord in the US Senate. This vote was 68-32 in favour, reflecting this kind of bipartisan feeling of a need that they need to counter China's rise. It does, however, have to pass the House of Representatives before it ends up on the president's desk to be signed into law, and we understand that it may not be quite as welcome once it reaches the House of Representatives. It also opens the door for new sanctions to target Beijing over human rights practices. It commissions a new study into the origins of the coronavirus. It calls for a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, and it also puts hundreds of millions of dollars into countering the political influence of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is wide-ranging, and the US committing to spending a lot of money on this.
A prominent jihadist group allied to Al-Qaeda, JNIM, has denied committing the massacre in Solhan in northeastern Burkina Faso. The attack left at least 132 people dead. In a statement, the group condemns the massacre, which it claimed has nothing to do with Islam or jihad. More than 7,000 people have fled their homes in the northern region following the hit on Solhan village in Yaga province. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has condemned the incident while stating that terrorism continues to pose a serious threat to international peace and security. Now, for more on this, we have Fahiraman Rodriguez Kone, senior researcher, Sahel team at the Institute for Security Studies, joining us via Zoom from Bamako. Thank you very much, Fahiraman, for your time. So how credible is this denial by JNIM, and what is it important for them to put that denial out there at this time?
Well, for the time being, there is no empirical proof that the statement is true. However, In a context where attacks are now rarely claimed, this statement by Jenin could be credible. The main strategy of this group of Jenin for a long time has been to replace the state by gaining the population support through the provision of basic social services. And the mass killing of civilians will work against their interests, and it is important also for them to state this in a context where there are, I can say, competition with the Islamic State in this region.
So with the genuine denial, where is the blame likely to fall, and what could be the motivation for such a large-scale terror attack?
This region where the attack occurred is a part of a larger, broader Saharan region shared with Niger and Mali. And there is, as I said, is a highly disputed between jihadist groups affiliated to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, but also over local armed groups. And this attack could also be attributed to any unidentified armed group. However, we know that this civilian mass killing is a specific way of operating of Islamic State. And strong suspicion goes towards this group because of two additional reasons. Firstly, here this year, Islamic State claimed two similar attacks with more than 100 fatalities in the same area, but on the Niger side. Secondly, the head of this Islamic State group which conducted the Solon attack is a native of the Burkinabe region where the attack occurred, and that could also mean a strategy of implantation of the Islamic State in the region.
Oh, I feel...
Yes, and for the time being, it is too early to have a clear explanation of what's happened. First, but we can push, I think, three reasons. It could be a reprisal against the Solon community for its active cooperation with the National Army. It could also be, this region is a gold mining economic region.
All right. I'm afraid, Fahiraman, I have to jump in there. We are quickly running out of time, but we appreciate you giving us those insights. Thank you very much for your time. Fahiraman Rodrigue Kone joining us via Zoom in Bamako. Now, an ECOWAS delegation led by former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan is in Mali to mediate a transition toward elections in the country. Talks are being held with the new president of the Malian Transitional Government, Colonel Assimi Goïta. The United Nations mission in Mali and other international delegates are also taking part in the talks. ECOWAS is continuing on its call for the formation of an inclusive government. Goïta was sworn in on Monday as president after a second coup in just 9 months. However, the nation continues to face international pressure over the latest military takeover. The African Union has suspended Mali's membership, and France halted its joint military operations with the country.
It was above all a question through this meeting following the Accra summit to see a little how the transition was put in place. We talked a lot about the government that will be put in place and inclusivity, and especially to show that ECOWAS is ready to support the transition process so that the objectives are achieved. So on this point, there were really very positive exchanges, and I believe that the mediator came out reassured from these exchanges.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has put his Minister of Health, Zweli Mkhize, on special leave. The move comes amid allegations that the Health Department irregularly awarded COVID-19 related contracts to a company controlled by former associates of Mkhize. A statement from the presidency asserts that the period of leave will enable the minister to attend to allegations and investigations. It's the latest in a series of corruption allegations linked to coronavirus-related tenders that have caused public outcry. Tourism Minister Mamoloko Kubayi-Ngubane will serve as acting Minister of Health until further notice. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted a new political declaration to guide the future response to HIV and AIDS. The declaration was adopted with 165 votes in favor at the ongoing high-level meeting. Russia and 3 other countries voted against, and their objections to the text prevented a more customary adoption by consensus. The meeting will also review progress made in reducing the impact of HIV since the last gathering in 2016. The head of the UN program for HIV and AIDS has called for unity in the fight against inequality.
HIV rates are not following the trajectory that we together promised. Indeed, amidst the fallout from the COVID crisis, we could even see a resurgent pandemic. But a never-ending HIV pandemic is not our fate. Even in spite of all the setbacks, we can end AIDS as a public health threat by 2030, as we promised, if the world comes together. The evidence and analysis is clear. Inequalities in power, in status, in rights and voice are driving the HIV pandemic. Inequalities kill. As the global AIDS strategy sets out, to end AIDS, we have to end the inequalities which perpetuate it.
We need to stop blaming, shaming, and discriminating against people in need and start creating the enabling environments that can provide real help and hope. These supports should include quality education, as well as sex education in and out of school, safe and user-friendly healthcare services, and the ability to make choices about their own bodies, about their partners. And if we want to end AIDS, we must respect and protect the rights of everyone, everywhere.
The Nigerian Army and Air Force say they have foiled a terrorist attack in the northeastern state of Borno. Officials say many suspected insurgents were killed as the soldiers engaged them in a fierce gun battle. Our correspondent Tessem Akende reports.
The suspected terrorists attempted the attack on the Dikwa community on Tuesday. The armed men are thought to belong to the ISWAP militant group, which is a rival faction in the region to Boko Haram. They reportedly arrived in a convoy of armed trucks but met resistance from Nigerian military forces. Many militants are understood from local sources to have been killed in the gun battle, although exact numbers are unclear. ISWAP is a breakaway faction of the Boko Haram militant group which has waged a long-running insurgency in the north of the country. Tessem Akende, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
Foreign ministers from China and across Southeast Asia have reached several agreements on topics ranging from the pandemic to a key river. China's Wang Yi met with his counterparts in Chongqing Tuesday. The countries shared the river known as Lancang in China and Mekong in Southeast Asia. Feng Yilei reports from Chongqing.
China shares the key waterway with Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam. The countries say they have achieved increasing shared benefits under the mechanism known as Lancang-Mekong cooperation. Now they are facing new opportunities and challenges.
We
will continue to uphold the Lancang-Mekong cooperation spirit of a shared river, a shared future. Under the meeting's theme of strengthening cooperation against the pandemic and towards recovery, we should earnestly sum up experience, actively expand cooperation areas, jointly plan for cooperative recovery after the pandemic, so as to send a strong message to the international community that the 6 countries are working hand in hand for mutual benefit and common development under the new circumstances.
China has pledged to continue to provide COVID vaccines and medical supplies to its neighbors and to support capacity building against the pandemic with a special fund for public health under Lancang-Mekong cooperation. Other measures include boosting land sea connectivity, trade and investment, people-to-people exchange to promote recovery.
I'm of the view that the COVID-19 pandemic has been a serious test of our mutual trust, mutual confidence and solidarity. hard time would always reveal the true friend.
The foreign ministers of Southeast Asian countries spoke highly of the outcomes in their cooperation over the past 5 years, particularly in managing water resources in the Lancang-Mekong River. The countries agreed to increase the efforts with the aim of realizing sustainable development goals by 2030. China says it will build 23 water supply projects for Mekong countries and conduct safety inspections for 40 dams this year. And it also calls for attention to the environment, including biodiversity protection, disaster management, and crackdowns on illegal logging and wildlife trade. The meetings on Tuesday adopted 3 documents on enhancing cooperation in sustainable development, encouraging cooperation between localities, and cooperation in traditional medicine. Experts of the riparian countries hope the LMC as a sub-regional mechanism can continue to support community building and further integration of ASEAN, thus helping boost China-ASEAN ties and bringing about a more open, inclusive and prosperous region. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Chongqing.
This is Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. Zimbabwe seeks to allay fears of vaccine shortage amid nationwide inoculation drive. And a 99-year-old woman becomes the oldest South African to get COVID-19 vaccine.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
US Vice President Kamala Harris is wrapping up her trip south of the border. During a visit to Mexico, she met with President Andres Manuel López Obrador. At the top of the agenda, curbing a spike in migration from Central America. Frank Contreras reports from Mexico City.
Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to Guatemala and Mexico this week comes as the United States is registering steady increases of undocumented immigrants entering the U.S. from the border with Mexico. In March, U.S. border authorities registered a record-breaking 19,000 unaccompanied migrant children trying to enter the United States. In April, U.S. border authorities said more than 170,000 encounters with migrants occurred at the U.S.-Mexico border, marking the highest number in over 20 years. Harris met with Mexican President Andres Manuel López Obrador to talk about how to best deal with this pressing issue. Their meeting comes days after López Obrador's party lost its supermajority in the Congress in midterm elections.
I cannot say it enough. Most people don't want to leave home. And when they do, it is usually for one of 2 reasons. Either they are fleeing harm, or to stay home means that they cannot satisfy the basic needs to sustain and take care of their families.
The central issue is migration. We will help. We have been talking about how together, with cooperation toward development and well-being for the greater security, we will create a plan to respond to the migration phenomenon.
U.S. and Mexican officials signed a memorandum of understanding, promising enhanced cooperation to create development programs for El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. High-level talks included discussions about the need for regional investments that would give Mexicans and Central Americans a reason to stay home. Bilateral talks included a plan for the United States to send more than 1 million vaccines to Mexico. All of this comes as thousands of deported migrants continue waiting in the Mexican border cities of Tijuana, Ciudad Juarez, and Reynosa, among others.
Those migrants, women, men, and children, find themselves in a state of political limbo, and they're waiting for U.S. officials to decide their fate. Frank Contreras, CGTN, Mexico City.
The Zimbabwean government has dismissed fears that COVID-19 vaccines are running out and says deliveries for fresh stocks are forthcoming. Here's Peninah Karibe with more details.
Since receiving its first consignment in February, Zimbabwe has been aggressively administering jabs in a nationwide drive. However, in recent weeks, some people who wanted to get inoculated have been turned away. Wilkins Hospital is one of the main vaccination centers, and previously there would have been long queues as scores of people came here to get inoculated. In recent times, though, activity has ground to a virtual halt, although authorities insist it's not because the vaccines have run out.
We want to give priority to the second dose, to make sure that those who got the first dose get their second dose. The first dose, yes, as we are saying, supplies are dwindling, but we are expecting a bigger consignment in a very short time. As you know, there is a shortage of vaccines internationally. There is a lot of competitions going on. So right now we're just going through our procurement processes, and we are expecting in a week or a few days.
Over 1 million people have received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccines. The country plans to inoculate about 10 million people, and the finance minister had previously said the government would procure 1 million doses per month. Despite the current supply lag, officials insist the country is on course to fulfill its plans.
Let me allay fears of some in our nation who might think that the COVID-19 vaccination program is about to falter. It is not, and it will not. Government continues to place a high premium on preserving life. It continues to use its resources and the international goodwill it commands to access regular, adequate vaccines which enable us to maintain the vaccination tempo and thus save our people.
The government reiterated that the vaccines will be administered free and would continue to be rolled out on a voluntary basis. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Soon-to-be centenarian Emily Mohapi has become the oldest South African to be vaccinated, and she's urging her fellow citizens to do the same. The Soweto resident took the COVID-19 vaccine as she prepares for her 100th birthday, set to be marked in just a few months. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Emily Mohapi is 100 this year. She is the oldest South African so far to take a COVID-19 jab. Hesitant at first, she's happy with her decision.
When I came back from being vaccinated, I felt very strong. I even took out some of my clothes to wash them.
Emily was born just after the 1918 flu pandemic, which infected over 500 million people. But she says she's never seen anything as devastating as COVID-19.
Since I've lived, Corona is the worst thing that I've ever seen in my life. Corona kills people.
Mohapi's bravery is inspiring others around her.
So when Mama Emily was going, I didn't see her, but people were telling me and they started registering me, and I was motivated and I decided to go.
It makes me very happy because when I saw Mama Emily get vaccinated, I told myself that Mama Emily is older than me and she's getting vaccinated, so I must go.
Fears over taking the vaccine remains a challenge. Hiccups around registration and accessibility is also delaying the process.
One of the major problems was that the vaccination stations
where people are going to be vaccinated, and not within the poor communities. Like for instance, in Protea South, there's no vaccination station, there's no registration station.
Emily, meanwhile, is looking forward to her 100th birthday and has some good advice for a long life.
The first thing is everyone must get vaccinated. The second thing is keep busy and stay fit. I was working as a domestic worker and I was always making sure that I do something. That's why I'm still strong.
South Africa has almost tripled its vaccination count to 1.3 million jabs since the second phase began in May. Public participation is picking up, and Mohapi hopes it will encourage many others to do the same. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A herd of wandering elephants in China is on the move again after taking a bit of a rest. It's their 6th day lingering near Xiyang village in Yunnan province, some 80 kilometers away from downtown Kunming. Storms seemed to have slowed their journey after trekking 500 kilometers. Authorities are tracking the animals with drones, and their cameras captured rare images of the elephants sleeping on Monday. Usually, 3 or 4 adults remain awake on guard duty, but this time, all 15 fell asleep in a glade. The little one was surrounded by the adults. It woke up while the others were still sleeping, but failed to climb out of the adults' protective circle. With the herd on the move again, local governments have prepared trucks of food on a separate path to keep them away from populated areas. It's still unclear what precisely triggered their movement. Here in Africa, animal migrations occur on land, sea and in the skies. CGTN's Robert Nagila takes a look at the top 5 animal migrations on the continent.
Unknown to many of us, the largest wildlife migration in Africa takes place over the skies in Zambia. Known as the fruit bat migration, it occurs between October and December, when about 10 million fruit bats descend on the Kasanka National Park's Mushitu swamp forest. On land, the longest wildlife migration is found in Botswana. Here, zebras travel close to 1,000 kilometers. Their migration begins in early December between the Chobe River and Xai-Pan. Next, and perhaps the most famous wildlife migration on the continent, is the Great Wildebeest Migration, considered one of nature's wonders. It occurs throughout the year, reaching the climax between June and October. Close to 2 million wildebeest cross from the Serengeti in Tanzania to the Masai Mara in Kenya in search of greener pastures. Between the months of April and June, another little-known animal migration takes place. Millions of lesser and greater flamingo species fly in from neighboring countries to Lake Nakuru and Lake Bogoria along Kenya's Rift Valley for breeding. And between the months of June and November, attention switches to Hermanus in South Africa, where thousands of southern right whales arrive from their summer feeding grounds in the Antarctic. These whales migrate to the area known as Hermanus to mate and give birth. The migration begins in the Antarctic and covers about 5,000 kilometers. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Tanzanian fishing communities are calling for more support from the government in protecting the Indian Ocean. They also want to be more involved in policy making to design a more sustainable way to use the ocean. 1.7% of Tanzania's GDP comes from fisheries. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
Life as a fisherman is all Juma Kasim has known. The Indian Ocean has been a source of subsistence for him and generations before him. He is one of the over 500,000 fishermen who fish these waters daily. As Kasim joins millions around the world to celebrate World Oceans Day, he is urging the government to protect the ocean he loves and, more importantly, needs to survive.
We have to all protect it, us and the government. This is our source. Even the coming generations will need to use the ocean. We found the ocean, our parents used it, and long after we are gone, our children will depend on the ocean too. We must protect it.
The world's oceans are under attack from overfishing, plastic waste, and other forms of pollution like oil spills. Studies have shown 90% of the ocean's big fish populations are depleted, and 50% of its coral reefs have been destroyed. The government is looking to change that.
We are proposing to have what we call protected areas in the oceans, so that we protect the ocean, we protect the environment of the ocean, because we know this is very important for us, for our lives, for our livelihood. So we need to do that.
Plastic pollution is a serious threat to the world's oceans, including the Indian Ocean, which covers the East African region. Despite regional attempts to address the problem, such as the EAC Pothrin Materials Bill of 2017, which bans single-use plastic, East Africa differs in terms of plastic legislation and policy effectiveness.
Tanzania has 1,424 kilometers of Indian Ocean coastline, including Zanzibar and Pemba Islands. This is the biggest for any East African country, and it contributes to the livelihood of about 4 million people in the form of fishing, tourism, and oil and gas mining.
Kretus Mtonga has worked to support sustainable fisheries management for the livelihood of Tanzanian fishermen in coastal communities. He says engaging the local community in decision-making is key in the fight to save the world's oceans.
Government should consider these local people in every decision they're making. For instance, the laws and policies, sometimes they come out very quickly, so quickly. So that I think when they engage these coastal communities, they might work together in finding solutions, and it will be very easy for them to adapt.
Millions of Tanzanians depend on the Indian Ocean for employment in ocean-based industries, as well as for an important source of protein. So Juma Kasim and others hope that more efforts are taken to protect the ocean they love and need to survive. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
In Kenya, the number of sea turtles has dropped drastically in the southern coast due to human activity and marine pollution. Local fishermen are now taking part in conservation efforts in an attempt to ensure the survival of the endangered species. Let's take a look.
The Tiwi Turtle Police is an organization engaged in sea turtle protection on the southern coast of Kenya. The team consists of local fishermen who have received training on animal protection. These fishermen are responsible for managing a 12-kilometer stretch of beach. Every morning they patrol the area. If they find a turtle's nest, they first confirm whether the nest is in a safe place or needs to be relocated. They then build a fence around the nest and mark it.
Now we have 66 nests since from January 2021 up to now. We have 66 nests. So we are happy to see that the number of turtle is coming up, and we need tourism. When the corona stopped, we need the tourism to come and see the sea turtle.
When the turtles hatch, staff from the organization ensure the newborns find their way into the sea.
Turtles are very important because, first of all, they are endangered species. And in our ocean here of East Africa, Indian Ocean, we have got 5 types of the turtles. There is some fishermen, they used to kill them to use them as a meat, and also they use, especially the green turtle, to use them as oil as a medicine. So in that situation, we saw that the turtle are going to be finished in the coast. The ocean is very important to be protected because of our climate changes. We can see the climate changes, pollutions, and also the sea current is changing. You can see there's a lot of sea grasses, seaweeds have been swept out from the ocean and comes out. So there is more important the ocean to be protected.
The Tiwi team also cleans up plastic garbage along the beach to prevent the potential threat to marine life. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
The World Bank expects the global economy to rebound at its fastest pace in 80 years. It's predicted to grow by 5.6% this year, the fastest post-recession recovery in decades. That's partly led by a strong rebound from both China and the United States. The World Bank has revised up China's growth forecast for this year to 8.5%. Analysts credit the country's ability to contain the pandemic quickly and a boom in global trade. But the recovery isn't even. Many developing economies continue to struggle with the pandemic, holding back their recovery. Sudan has fully liberalized gasoline and diesel prices following a statement from the Finance Ministry. Previous prices would be cancelled to give way to new prices in line with import costs. Tuesday's move is the latest in a series of fuel price increases. The price of gasoline will now rise from 150 Sudanese pounds, which is just about $35 per litre, to 290 pounds, or about $68. Sudan has been implementing aggressive IMF-monitored reforms in the hopes of turning around its economy and attracting debt relief and renewed financing. The reforms have been painful, and annual inflation climbed to 363% in April. Sudanese officials and the IMF have said the reforms, which included a sharp currency devaluation, would cause prices to rise and add to pressure on citizens. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta was in Ethiopia for bilateral talks on regional matters of mutual concern. The Kenyan president, accompanied by high-level politicians and investors, witnessed Kenya's Safaricom receive its official license to operate in the country. This followed a successful $850 million bid by a consortium of international telecom companies, in which Safaricom is the lead.
We designed and implemented a new and forward-looking proclamation that would govern the sector, established an independent regulatory authority, the Ethiopian Communications Authority, engaged stakeholders and the public for feedback on every step on the way, launched the tendering process, and of course, lastly, managed to secure large amount of foreign direct investment into Ethiopia.
Kenya's presence here today is not only a testimony of our long-standing good neighborly and brotherly relations between Ethiopia and Kenya, but also between our two peoples. It is indeed a visible reminder of the deep bonds that hold Kenya and Ethiopia together.
Kenya's flour sector is turning to China's lucrative market in an effort to boost earnings and diversify from traditional markets. But aftershocks from the COVID-19 pandemic are still being felt in the sector despite a rebound. CGTN's Robert Nagila reports.
It's mid-morning at the Redlands Roses flower farm in Ruiru, about 45 kilometers from Nairobi. The first of 3 daily harvests is almost complete. There are over 200 variants of roses grown here in what can be described as a labor-intensive process from the point of planting to boxing. Kenya is the third largest exporter of cut flowers, with Europe accounting for about 70% of its roses. In 2019, flower exports generated about $1 billion in sales. To boost sales, more farms like Redlands have entered the lucrative Chinese market.
We started 5 years ago because it's a very big country, so a big volume of consumers and a big volume of high acquisitive power.
After harvest, the flowers are taken for processing to identify quality roses for export. The flower farm exports spray roses to China. These have more than 1 flower per stem.
Because of the COVID, the business stopped quite a long time in China. We were at about 100 boxes to 200 boxes a week, and currently we are at 100 boxes, but it's increasing.
Like other sectors, flower exports plunged at the onset of the pandemic. But as global markets have reopened, the sector has rebounded. But the after effects are still being felt.
We have a very limited number of cargo planes moving from Kenya to China weekly. So this is really our major problem, is to find freight capacity. It's limiting really our growth in China.
Currently, only China Southern Airlines operates cargo freight between the 2 countries. Back at Redlands, the final process, boxing the fresh flowers, is underway. From here, they'll be transported to the airport and onto a plane for the Chinese market. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Tunisia has launched the COVID-19 vaccination campaign for tourism professionals across the country. The inoculation campaign is aimed at jump-starting the vital tourism industry, which has been battered by the pandemic. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnet Shawashi with the details.
The Ministry of Tourism and Handicrafts declared that the campaign will last several weeks. All vaccinated professionals will be allowed to resume work at hotels and tourism facilities which have reopened in the country.
Our objective is to protect the tourism sector staff as well as Tunisian and foreign tourists visiting the country. The tourism industry is the most affected sector since the outbreak of the pandemic. It's been completely shut down and paralyzed for more than a year now. Some 400,000 families are without financial resources after losing the only source of revenue, which is tourism.
Health and tourism authorities aim to show Tunisia as a COVID-19 safe destination. The vaccination drive is seen as vital to enable the government to restart the tourism industry, which is a major economic engine for the North African state.
This is a positive message to the whole world and is an open invitation to visit Tunisia. All tourism employees will be vaccinated and ready to welcome tourists in safe hotels.
I hope that all the people will get vaccinated. As tourism professionals, we are in direct contact with international travelers. The vaccine will protect us from a potential risk of getting infected and losing our job again after resuming work.
As the COVID-19 task force loosens restrictions on indoor dining and expands access to vaccines, restaurant employees and wait staff, as well as chefs, are also getting vaccinated.
Making thousands of dishes per week is a huge responsibility, especially amid the health crisis. The vaccination campaign guarantees our safety and offers the best health conditions for clients.
Tunisian authorities have made significant steps to revive tourism while respecting a strict health protocol. More than 3,500 tourists are currently staying in Tunisian hotels, compared to over 200,000 during the same period in 2019. According to the National Institute of Statistics, tourism revenues decreased by 55% in the first 4 months of 2021 compared to the same period in 2020. As a vital economic sector, this industry is expected to see a significant boost due to the progress in vaccination campaigns in most countries. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Nigerian government has said it was in discussions with Twitter after it suspended the U.S. social media giant services in the country. Foreign Minister Geoffrey Onyeama said after a meeting with diplomats that the government wanted to resolve the row with the tech giant that has close to 40 million users in the country. Alexandria Majala has more details.
Nigeria says it's in discussions with Twitter after it suspended the U.S. social media giant services in the country, branding its users unpatriotic. The Twitter suspension has provoked an outcry from the international community and rights groups who denounced it as a threat to freedom of expression in Africa's most populous country.
We recognize that there are issues of responsible use of social media, but we remain firm in our position that free access to the ability to express oneself is actually very important.
We believe in human rights, freedom of speech, but all that also has to be used where freedom of speech is concerned responsibly, and where that is not the case, the government obviously has to take measures.
Nigeria said it was halting the platform's operations indefinitely on Friday, 2 days after Twitter deleted a comment from President Muhammadu Buhari's account referring to civil unrest that the firm said violated its rules. The presidency denied that the suspension was a response to the removal of that post.
Why we've taken this measure is to see to what extent we can rebalance these media as forces of good and stop them being used as platforms for destabilization.
According to NOI polls, a public opinion and research organizations, more than 39 million Nigerians have a Twitter account. The platform has played an important role in public discourse in Nigeria, with hashtags Bring Back Our Girls after Boko Haram kidnapped 276 schoolgirls in 2014 and End SARS during the anti-police brutality protests last year. Some Nigerian broadcasters are concerned the clampdown on Twitter is part of a more general crackdown against the media. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead after the break. Egyptian government moves to boost production of high-quality copies of popular artifacts to curb antiquities smuggling.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Egyptian government has established its first replica production line to meet the growing demand for ancient artifacts. This is aimed at offering high-quality copies of popular statues and other artifacts for sale to tourists. For many years, the government has been fighting the smuggling of authentic artifacts. Adel Mahroui tells us more.
The ancient Egyptian civilization has attracted many from all over the world. Millions of tourists come every year to see for themselves the magnificence of the pharaonic monuments and artifacts. And to further enhance this experience, Egypt is now offering locally produced replicas of famous treasures so that tourists can take some well-made souvenirs back home.
It wasn't appropriate to find all ancient Egyptian replicas with stamps saying that they were made in other countries, but not in Egypt, the owner of the civilization. To establish this facility, the Tourism and Antiquities Minister partnered with the private sector. The factory is the first of its kind in the Middle East. It's a very important step for the country.
This 10,000 square meters facility is equipped with all the necessary technologies and equipped to help the artists here to precisely cut metal, wood and mold ancient statues from many materials and in different sizes. 150 specialists work here. The team includes ancient Egyptian restorers, fine arts graduates, sculptors, and skilled labor.
I don't think that there are better people than Egyptian artists to create replicas of their own inherited civilization. An artifact restorer spends years working and memorizing just one ancient piece. They know all minor details. I don't think anyone can reach their precision.
The factory currently has the capacity to create up to 1,500 pieces a month. Expansion plans are in place to increase its production capacity to 5,000 pieces.
Companies are approaching us for long-term deals to supply them with our replicas. Online stores have offered to market our products. We also offer to create galleries of the factory's products.
The Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities will create sales outlets for its replicas factory at all Egyptian museums and other ancient Egyptian sites. Kunuz's first store will be at Egypt's newest attraction, the Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Cairo. This is the first of its kind factory in Egypt. The government says it will build more to cover domestic needs and begin exportation. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And ahead in sports news, Ethiopia's latest bet